All right, hi guys. We're gonna be painting some Trench Crusade today. Trench Crusade is a 3D printable game using tabletop rules that is essentially World War I, but demons exist. So very grimdark, very kind of fun to paint. This is from the new Antioch force. Specifically, we're going to be painting this for the Prussian team in that. And if we look at our World War I history, we'll find that the Prussians were part of Germany at the time. So I'm going to be painting this force with a focus on World War I German uniforms. Okay, let's get down to this. We're going to start with the base coat for our helmet and metal gauntlets there. And for that, we are going to use some Valdor Gold. Now, Valdor Gold is technically an air paint, but that's totally fine because we're just not going to run it through the airbrush. When you're running something, when you're painting with an air paint, but not through an airbrush, you essentially treat it like it's already pre-thinned. So it's going to be, you're going to see it right out of the bottle here, where it is very easy to work with, just straight out of the pot. Super smooth and buttery texture, has great consistency, and is just kind of ready to paint with. And it's this really pretty white gold color that we're going to start with. All right, and so we're not going to be hitting too much on this model with that, but we are going to hit his sallet helmet. Sallets are an interesting style of helmet where they don't really have a bottom. They're really common to see on historical infantry. All right, there we go. With our Valdor Gold now applied, we have our nice sallet helmet and his little hand protectors. Sallet helmets are interesting because they essentially have no bottom here. His chin is exposed out of the bottom of this helmet. So we're going to make sure that we keep that fun feature of that historical helmet accurate. And we're going to bring out more of its geometry by doing a glaze with our Calyx Bronze. Now, Calyx Bronze here is going to bring out the curves and dips in the helmet. And we are essentially going to water this down into a glaze. Now, I live in Utah, which is hot and dry, which means water evaporates like no one's business. So I use mediums instead because they give me a bit longer of a working time. For a glaze, we're going to separate this down 1 to 2. So 1 part paint, 2 parts medium. I like to use Glaze Medium by Vallejo when I'm doing this exact thing because it ends up just a little smoother, a little bit more of a silky texture that kind of helps keep everything flowing nicely. It's just going to be 1 part and 2 part. Now it looks like I brought a little bit more paint than I originally thought, so we're just going to add a little bit more of that glaze. There we go. That's the consistency that we're looking for this paint. We're just going to take that and we're going to bring it into the curves on the helmet. And this stuff is nice and thin. It clings to the geometry, but we can just as easily wick it up if we put a little too much. And we're just going to try and get that into our lowered areas and our recesses. We're not going to worry about our deepest crevices because we're going to hit those next. Alright, and there we are. We have our Calyx Bronze laid down. And our next step is to do a very similar thing, but only in the deepest recesses with Warplock Bronze. So in prepping our Warplock Bronze, we're going to keep it in a very similar way as we did with our Castellix. Where we're going to take a bit of paint, take a little bit off to the side here, bring out just a bit of that wash medium, or that glaze medium. 2 parts, nice and smooth. And this keeps the metallic luster of the helmet, which is what we want at the moment, but also allows us to do our deep recesses. So I'm going to be focusing mostly on his eye visor and the lines around his the visor of his helmet. And that's going to give us that nice separated detail to show that they're 2 parts. We're just very gently dragging that into the deep recesses. Really make them stand out. And sometimes when you get a little bit of overspill, you are more than welcome, especially when it's nice and thin like a glaze, to just take a finger and just dab it away. It's not really a mistake, it's just little things happen from time to time. Alright, we now have our Warplock Bronze fully done on that helmet. We got nice definition between the 2 pieces of it, and we've got good definition on his little gauntlet there. If you look real closely, you can see a little Maltese cross on it. Once again, Trench Crusade is real fun. It hits that little historical note in me because it uses a bunch of historical components into these characters, but in ways that are new and unique. You wouldn't see a sallet helm on a World War I German soldier, and yet here we are, and it looks fantastic, and it's going to look so good once it's all painted up. So our next step is we need these to not be gold, but silver. We want the gold undertones because it's going to make it look worn and a little dirty and nasty, but we need these to look like steel. So we are going to now dry brush over everything we just did with Stormhost Silver. I know that is a very bright silver to finish this off with, but trust me, it's going to end up looking great. This also serves as our highlight to these, as we've only done shadows so far. And so we're just going to prep our dry brush a little bit, just get a bit of paper towel or sponge, and you knock off most of it on a paper towel, so that way when you tap it, you just get a little bit of paint off. And we're just gonna hit it and just hit all those fun details and bring everything into a cooler color shift, while leaving the warm tones underneath. Don't forget to hit his gauntlets. Don't be too concerned if you get a little messy here, as we're going to clean it all up around it next. All right. Our next step is going to be his good old overcoat. Now, since we're basing these off of World War I German uniforms, we need that kind of washed out green. To get the color that we're going for the military coat, which is this kind of washed out green, we're actually going to mix a custom color here, which is going to be 1-to-1 Death Corpse Drab and Deepkin Flesh. Now, the way these two paints interact results in a very good approximation of what the World War I German uniforms colors were, at least in the photos I've been able to find. Now that we're ready to start painting our coat, we're just going to start hitting all of it. This color we want to put over the entire coat. Alright, now that we've got his coat based, we get to start doing some shading with it. Now, we've got a really cool thing we can do here because we color mixed his coat, where we can create natural shadows and highlights by adjusting that color mix. So I'm going to start with my first shadow, and our base mix was 1-to-1, and so for this shadow mix I'm going to do 2 parts Death Corpse Drab and 1 part Deepkin Flesh, and that will give us a darker tone that we can then use to shadow our creases. So we'll go ahead and thin that. And we're just going to hit the folds in the fabric. And what this does is it allows the geometry of the model to shine. And if you're not sure what to make darker, that's okay. You're allowed to guess. No one is judging you. It often feels scary to start slapping paint down, but it's how we make progress. Now that he is got his first shade on, we're going to take some straight Death Corpse Drab and thin that to be our deep shade. And what we're going to do with this deep shade is just at the points that have deep folds are we going to put that on. And what that will do is create a better contrast in our geometry. And we'll just really make the way his fabric lays stand out. Most of the deep folds on this particular model are right on the arm here. Now that we have our shading done on his coat, we get to move to the highlights. So for our highlights, we're going to do the very same process, but the opposite, which sounds confusing, but bear with me. We're going to start with 2 parts Deepkin to 1 part Drab. And what that will do is give us a good natural highlight shade, which is lighter than our base coat. I'm going to go ahead and just thin a bit of that. And now that we have our highlight shade, we can take that and just bring it along the raised edges of the fabric. Nice and gentle. We're hitting any spots that's bulging out, is around creases, anything that we want to stand out. We're going to hit with this highlight. Now, at this step, you do want to start being a little bit more careful, as mistakes we'll just have to go back and touch up. Go ahead and hit the raised fabric pieces, and it really starts to bring out the volume that this fabric has and the way it lays and flows. Now, just like we did with the drab, we're going to take some straight deepkin flesh, and this time we are just hitting the most pronounced pieces, the line along a super deep crevice. Just these little touches here and there to really strike that detail up. Maybe the corner of his coat that's leading. That line there. Really small, simple details. We want these to read as bright points, not as the color of the fabric. Alright, and there he is. His coat is now painted. I am, however, going to go back and add in a little bit of extra detail. I want his buttons to match his helmet. So I'm going to touch those buttons with just a little bit of Valdor gold. It's alright to go back. If you see something that you didn't know what to do with before, and you know what you want to do with it now, it is totally okay to just go back and add it. Next, we're going to work on his pants. Now, historically, the pants of these uniforms would be the same color as their coats, but that doesn't really make good models. It doesn't really have the contrast that we need. So we're going to use a different color. A washed out blue is what we're going to kind of go with. And for that, we need to mix these two colors. We're going to do a 1-to-1 mix of Dark Reaper and Skaven Blight Dinge. And then we're just going to take that and start putting it all over his pants. Now be very careful to not get this on the coat, as we don't necessarily want to have to go back. Okay, and on this model, we're also going to put that under his salad helmet on his little chin covering. Now that that's done and his pants are based, we need to create his shade tone. For that, because we don't really want to take this and change its tone too much, we are actually going to take that same Dark Reaper and this time add black to it. Now, I like Duncan's black, but you don't have to use, you can use any black that you would like. Black and straight white are two of those colors that it really doesn't matter what you use. They're whatever one you prefer. We're going to put this in our shadows. For me, that's going to be where his pants meet the coat. And in that inseam line. And over on his bedroll, we can put it on our ends here, and then just gently squish that off to make those stand out a bit more. Just like that. And in the creases of his neck. Now that his shadow mix is done, we are going to do our first tritone. Now, with this, we are taking our original base mix of 1-to-1 Skaven Blight Dinge and Dark Reaper, and then we are adding to that a 1 mix of Administratum Gray. Now what I mean by that is that we are taking one brush load of the mix and one brush load of Administratum Gray. So it's not a 1-to-1-to-1, it's a 1-to-1 with our base mix. Okay, I'm gonna put this where we want the light to be hitting. So just on his knees there, a little bit on that inseam, and on the bedroll edges. Each of the models in New Antioch have these little leg wraps on the connecting their pants and their boots. That's going to be our next target to hit, and while we do it, we're also going to hit these sandbags, and those can be the same color, and that'll be fine. We are going to start with just a simple layer of Carrick stone, and then we're just going to hit his little gator wraps. With that base coat now complete, we will do our first wash on both his gator wraps and the sandbags. For that wash, we are going to use Talarn sand. We're going to glaze that down. Once we have our wash, just start putting it That wash stage is now complete, and it's still a little wet, but that's okay, because we're going to do a deep shade, and it's all right if they blend together. Next up, we're going to do the exact same process, but with XV88. And we will come back to that in a moment when it's dry. Now that those sandbags are dry, we're just going to come back with our Carrick stone and highlight all the areas that we want to shine. This works because we washed everything with that Talarn sand first, and so now we're just picking it back out. Next will be our leather. For our leather, we are going to do a 1-to-1 mix of dryad bark and black. Once you have the right consistency, we're aiming for his backpack and his gloves. For most of this process, we have been doing mid-tone shade highlight. But for the leather, we actually start with the shade tone and build up from there. So we're starting very, very dark and are just going to be building up after that. With that under layer complete, we're now going to come in with straight dryad's bark and start picking out all the areas of the leather that we want to shine. All the areas we want to draw attention to. It's what we'll be hitting with the Dryad's Bark. With the Dryad Bark highlight complete, our next goal is to show the wear on this leather. This has been through days and days on end in mud and rain and is probably falling apart a little bit. It's lost its luster. We need to show its wear. For that, we're going to create an edge highlight using Dryad Bark and Storm Vermin Fur, like this. That done, we get this lovely worn leather color. And we start highlighting. There we are. The leather is now complete. Our next step is all the working metal bits. Our musket, our canteen, our shovel, the little buttons and things on the backpack. Just to really give it something to stand out with. Now, we want this to look like a different metal in the armor, so for that, we're going to mix Stormhost and Lead Belcher into our base coat. With our silver now complete, we begin hitting the details. Now, when it comes to dirtying down silvers, really the best way to go is combining a brown and a black wash. Now, we could make these ourselves out of a black and brown paint. Once you have your mix of black and brown washes, just go ahead and trace that over most of your silver details. Anything that has some real geometry to it. And then let that sit to dry. Once your wash is dry, now here in Utah that takes almost no time at all. But once your wash is dry, go ahead and take your mixed silver base back up and just hit some of the raised areas on your geometry, just to bring back a little bit of that shine. With the silver now complete, we are an extra step closer. Our actual yeoman is almost complete. The next step for him is going to be hitting the patches on his arms. Now, these uniforms had red accent details, so we are going to give him red patches. We are going to base them in corn red. While we wait for those patches to dry, we're going to start on the mud on this guy's base. For that, we are going to base his mud in Rhinox hide. The dirt and the mud on his base now covered in Rhinox, we can return our attention to the patches. Now, these patches have some nice geometry on them, so we're going to really make them stand out. We are going to start by bringing together Corn Red and Incubi Darkness. Now, these two together create a really pretty deep maroon color that is a perfect shade for Corn Red. Better than any of the other colors that come pre-mixed. And you end up with this gorgeous, deep color. Doesn't show well on my finger, but you'll see. Once you've got it thinned well enough that it can flow pretty easily off of your brush, go ahead and hit the recesses on this badge. With those badges now shaded, we're going to pick out the raised emblem on them, and we really want these to stand out. So we're going to hit them with gray sear to make them a white marking. Now it won't actually be white, but that's good. We don't want it to actually be white. I just want it to be off-white. With our gray sear, we're going to come in and pick out that raised emblem. And if you make any mistakes, that's okay. We can cover it back up and try again. One of the beautiful things about acrylics is you can always try again. To continue with the mud on the base, we get to come in with a warm Doom Bowl brown. Now you could dry brush this, but I would much rather take my time and make sure that I don't get any overspill on my model. So with the Doom Bowl brown, go ahead and start hitting the prominent points of your mud. Don't have to hit all of it, just enough to help give it some texture. Now, while we've got the Doom Bowl out, we're also going to hit the wood parts on this model, mainly the stock of his gun. Now, because Doom Bowl is a thinner paint, it is going to take us a few layers to get coverage. Once you're satisfied with how that Doom Bowl brown looks, we're going to go back to our Rhinox hide and make it into a wash. And we're going to take that along our gun, just tone it down a little. We're not going to let that stay too long before we wick it up and kind of just tint the surface. Now on our mud, we're going to do the same wash, but we're going to let it sit. Going to let it blend the Doom Bowl and the Rhinox hide back together to create striation and variation, but not standout details. With that wash of Rhinox hide done, our Yeoman is essentially complete. There is one last step, one secret weapon I like to use to really give this more of a grimdark feel though. But before we can do that, we have to let him sit for essentially 24 hours. So he will be left to sit overnight. And we are back after providing sufficient time for our paints to cure. Now, our secret weapon is a staple in the grimdark painting style, which is our wonderful Streaking Grime by AK Interactive. Now, Streaking Grime is this amazing enamel effect that essentially is going to darken and dirty and grunge everything up. Now, it is an enamel paint, so as we paint with it, we want to have mineral spirits on standby, and know that you can't clean this stuff with water. So what we're going to do is we're going to slather our enamel on every part of this and then give it about 15 minutes to sit before we start wicking stuff off. Okay, here we go. And we're just going to put it all over. Now that that has had some time to tack on, we gotta get our mineral spirits and Q-tips. Now, the way I like to do this is I'll dip one side of the Q-tip in spirits and one side I'll leave dry. And you kind of just rub away most of the enamel. We put it on just so that we could remove it, but as we remove it, it leaves a tint, a filter, if you will. And feel free to change out your cotton swabs as often as you need to. And as you do this cotton swabbing, make sure to remove any extraneous fibers that get stuck. They will show up at the end and you will notice them. Just go ahead and either with your fingers or with some tweezers, just go ahead and pluck them off. Now that's all removed, we can kind of see how it brought everything a little bit more together. I want to create a little effect where it looks like his coat is dirtier at the bottom. And so I'm going to go ahead and do an extra layer streak and grime focused entirely around the bottom of his coat. After giving that a bit to dry, just go ahead and mop that up. And there we are. A new Antioch Yeoman. Thank you all for joining me painting today.